Hi there, Randi Green here, and welcome to a little video I put together where I would like to touch ground with certain concepts of reality, expanded perception of reality, as well as the work with our higher order senses and higher order capacities. First and foremost, I want to show how we can be manipulated willingly or unwillingly, knowingly or unknowingly, to a larger or smaller degree in how we perceive reality and how that aligns with our psychological structure, because you remember I'm a psychotherapist, but I'm also a pioneer and I'm also an inventor, and I like to play around with ideas and I like to progress. Progress has many forms, progress can take many forms, and progress should be done every day. I promised you to show you how easily our minds can get manipulated. How would you respond if a person come up to you looking like this, little green woman? Would you respond well? Would you accept the appearance? Would you see it as something that's odd? Or would you say, whoa, wow, you're beautiful. You're different, but absolutely beautiful. Let me get to know you. It all depends on our psychological structure. Most of the time people don't respond that way. They have their own comfort zone. They have their own paradigms. And many people are in what we call denial of an expanded version of reality. They prefer things in a specific way, not this way, not at all. And this is a holographic overlay put there for a purpose, here for entertainment, other times for safety. I will assume that most of you are familiar with the topics of UFOs or whatever they're called. Some of the para-scientific ideas behind these, as well as some of the theoretical ideas around this. And I'm deliberately putting that way. Para means parallel with, or aside with, or next to. It's Greek. And with that also saying, well, instead of calling it a specific type of word, which I will deliberately not use here, we can begin to work with these as concepts of reality that expands our current understanding of what science is, how we do work scientifically, and how we use the scientific method. And why do I want to do it that way? Because I also got a bachelor's degree in theology. So with that squared away, the next part of this little introduction is that I have used photos from Unsplash, and I will give credit to the photographers beneath this movie. This movie is meant for YouTube. I might choose to upload it on Instagram. I have got an Instagram profile there as well, The Whole Academy by Randi Green. And the purpose of this is that it should be seen as infotainment, meaning some of it is what we could say within the realm of known science. Other level are within the psychological realm due to my psychotherapist background. And other levels of it are tied to the other realms and the other realities that are connected to this reality field. So that's kind of the background of this. I know many of you have already looked into a lot of these documentaries and infotainment that is already out there on the topic of extraterrestrial civilizations, their aircrafts, if we can call it that. At least they are in the ionosphere, so we could call them ionospheric crafts that are able to navigate in and out of our reality, between this reality and the other realms from where they breach, enter, manifest, take form, and deform, come into being and go out of being of our known reality. This, of course, also covers the aspects of the concepts of reality, what reality is, and the sciences behind reality. And that in itself is a topic that is vast, more than I can put into this little introductory movie. So what have I got to share here? What can I share? What is different? What is my angle? Where do I differ, as they say? What is my angle towards this? And there has been many people out there already done the same angle from their personal experiences. The whole academy is not just about the extraterrestrial civilizations. It is meant as a tool for our progression journey, not working with the known concepts, but actually go beyond the known concepts and try to reinterpret these into the type of cultural awareness we have today, our psychological structure we have today, but also recognizing and acknowledging that the human structure, energetic structure, holographic energetic structure is changing, and it's changing due to events that took part in the 1950s, where we got new parallel system. So what was it that came in the 50s? Was it the Roswell incident back in the 1947, 49, can't remember, or was it something entirely else? Well, everything has a beginning point, right? So we could say Roswell perhaps initiated a new timeline where a craft fell deliberately, or made so, for the purpose of seeding in a specific type of energetic and genetic feature into our reality field. With that and the invitation, different groups came in, began to collaborate with different groups within humanity, and they began some projects that I will dive into later on, called different types of hybridization projects, of which, no, they were not little green men, but they were definitely very dissimilar to who and what we are in all ways and forms. Before that, we also had different groups of extraterrestrial civilizations that were part and have been part of the solar system for the last 15,000 years. My claim is that they came here 15,000 years ago, and that's why, to a large degree, they have settled here in artificial fourth dimension that is connected to our solar system. They are living next to us. They have been part of whatever's going on our planet for a very long time. Some will say for good, others will say for ill. It's relative reality. It depends on in what context, within what circumstances, and in what means. But harm can never be accepted, and different forms of experiments that are going on without our consent cannot be accepted either. And to a large degree, what's been going on here has been done without our knowing consent. So with that put away and verbalized, you hereby understand that I'm not in any ways or forms participating willingly and to my own choice in any of the encounters and the experiences I will draw my information from, including the information I've been given in these experiences and some of the work that I have been unwillingly pushed in to do as part of the project that I am unwillingly and without my consent part of due to my birth into it. So this is not karma. This is not because I've chosen to be born into that lineage. This is not because it is an arrangement that I have done in a previous lifetime or a soul contract or anything similar. Why do I put emphasis on my unwillingness into this with a smile instead of crying? Because that would be more appropriate. So if you kind of feel a little bit of dissonance, cognitive dissonance here, me smiling and talking with a pretty face instead of crying and with puffed eyes, it's because I have been dealing with this my entire life. So unfortunately, it has become a known part of my psychological structure. It's a known part of my everyday life. It's a known part of what happens to me when I sleep at nighttime. It's a known part of my waking up and the many hours it takes for me to get myself sorted, cleared out of the nightly pull in, clear out of the energetic residuals, repairing of my holographic energetic architecture, and recalling who and what I am, and not what has been inserted during nighttime. Why do I put emphasis on my unwillingness into this? With a smile instead of crying, because that would be more appropriate. So if you kind of feel a little bit of dissonance, cognitive dissonance here, me smiling and talking with a pretty face instead of crying and with puffed eyes, it's because I have been dealing with this my entire life. So unfortunately, it has become a known part of my psychological structure. It's a known part of my everyday life. It's a known part of what happens to me when I sleep at nighttime. It's a known part of my waking up and the many hours it takes for me to get myself sorted, cleared out of the nightly pull in, clear out of the energetic residuals, repairing of my holographic energetic architecture, and recalling who and what I am, and not what has been inserted during nighttime. So with that also put away, you hereby understand that where I'm coming from, and that what I want to share here is not because yoo-hoo-hoo, this is so funny and I'm so special and this is so exciting. It is from a different angle. It is from the psychotherapeutic angle, as well as a little bit of diving into some kind of what we could call scientific mythology. There is a prominent psychologist that began that earlier on, and that's John E. Mack. Many of you can find his lectures out on YouTube. And he wrote some interesting questions, and he was trying to work with this from exactly a scientific angle, trying to implement it into known psychology. Now, we do know that the degrees we get at the university, including my bachelor degree in theology, they are within a specific paradigm. That the processes of humanity and the power sciences that the future demands of us is also part of what we could say the disclosure. And the disclosure is not just about the psychological effects on those of us who've been part of these special upgrading projects that I often refer to as military projects. And they are not known military projects. They are, of course, part of what we call deep black projects, or at least that's what Stephen Greer calls it. So again, if people want to look a little bit more into this, definitely Stephen Greer is a source of information, along with Richard Dolan and others that have been on the scene for quite some time and have carved some of the stones away that have been cloaking this topic to a large degree for most of us. So since we have already prominent people like Dr. Stephen Greer, he used to be an ER doctor, dedicating his life for this, as well as Richard Dolan, that's a historian. So we kind of have a little bit of the history, the digging of the second and first hand material to prove that this is actually going on, as well as now the Pentagon report and the acknowledgement of, yes, there are things in the sky we don't know what is. Then we can begin to go to the next step. And the next step is humans, and what those of us who've been part of these projects, who has instigated these projects, many of the ones that began them in the 50s under the agreement of the new parallel races that came in, they are no longer with us. And here, as always, I'm working on many different realms, and one of them is also talking to some of the ones that have crossed over that were part of these projects. So with that, I just threw into the mix, yes, I'm also clairvoyant, and yes, I can also talk to the ones that have crossed over, that are stuck in the realms around us, in the bridges between this realm and the artificial fourth dimension, including the encounters and some of the work that I have been part of as part of my quote-unquote training, which I have not agreed to, and the different psychotronic upgrading methods that I have been under in these projects, that you can say, well, are you now doing a whistleblowing here, or is it disclosure? No, not at all. These are just personal experiences. I can't claim that these are the experiences for everyone. But what I want to do here is to try and navigate into some sort of genuine collective understanding of what this is, as we have experienced, and done with other levels of psychology, as when I remember in the 80s and the 90s where it became so a new psychology. And you can here see I am taking little short movies that I will then later on clip together, so bear with me in these short recordings. Where I wanted to go with this is that due to my background as a psychotherapist, and since I was a kid having that question, why are people doing what they're doing? Why are they playing this double-faced game? Why is there this secrecy? Why are they not doing the natural things in life as they're supposed to? Why are they not more aware? What is it that's so exciting about this life? Looking at it, thinking, is this what people choose? Why do they choose to live like this? This is probably one of the most boring realities I've ever been in. It's enormously pretty. And with that, I began to understand, since nature and everything is so beautiful and everybody's just trotting along in all of that beauty, what's behind that? So my question was, as a kid, how come that this beautiful planet with all of its different life forms have humans in it that do not value it, do not treasure it, and at the same time are completely unaware of all of the energetic levels it holds and all the abilities of communication that is possible with whether it's insectoids or it is avens or reptoids or mammals or human or the realms beyond. Because as a kid I had what grown-ups would call nightmares. I would call it nightly visits from other realms that were lurking around in dark and that were lurking around in our reality at nighttime when most people go to sleep. Because when people go to sleep and leave their bodies, the body is there in stasis, and this reality will then be occupied by the night crawlers and by the ones that are living under the energies of the moon. And that's an agreement. So the agreement was made a long time ago with the ones that lives under the moon and the ones that lives in daytime under the sun. And we humans, we live under the agreements of the daytime, under the energies of the sun, which to a large degree is an artificial construction that was re-engineered 15,000 years ago. So that became possible, including this type of vessel that we have today. And many of the old lunar civilizations, they chose to enter into different types of species that exist during nighttime, because they don't really need to be in organic vessel like we do. They exist in other realms that are connected to older reality grids, from where they can unfold their consciousness potentials and develop their type of awareness inside this system. So the takeaway here is that there are many different life forms that are not just centered around humanity. However, as it is with all energetic beings, at some point they want to expand and they want more. And I know it sounds like some book of Tolkien or someone else that has talked about higher earth and low earth and middle earth. And it is part of the different types of myths that we are acquainted with. And perhaps it is because there has always been human storytellers that dives into and taps into and are able to access the other realms that are connected to this reality. So my work is not as, first and foremost, I began within the esoteric teaching systems with Alice A. Bailey, but it was not because I began from scratch. I actually began there because I already had a lot of experiences that I was trying to find head and tail in. So I dove into that material after having studied a lot of other material to begin with, including psychology. With that background, I also began my own meditation journey. I had already, as I said, a lot of experiences as a child, which I of course stored away since they were not well received. And I knew as a kid, probably shouldn't share this with anybody because that makes you sound a little bit kind of off and perhaps a little bit crazy, right? But I knew I wasn't, so that was to my advantage. And I had, in the home I grew up, we had one cat at a time. And I've mentioned this many times before, but my cats, and because we had more than one, and they all showed me the same behavior. They sensed my loneliness in that family home because I was different, and I was different in school, I was different out there. So I was taking care of myself, which at the time didn't feel nice and comfortable, but here as a grown-up and having done inner work and understanding, in our inner work, what if we discovered that this is our true appearance? That the physical form we have is an overlay. That this is how we truly are, who we truly are. How would we respond to that? Would we dare showing ourselves, our true self? Or would we still cloak ourselves, try to make ourselves different, try to look different, try to behave different, and in that way get lost in all of the cloaking and the hiding and the different approaches to what we truly are? So the first step is, of course, to accept who and what we are for those who truly are, and remember what we are, not just what we are in this life, but what we have been here, beyond, and other places as well. That's part of the journey. And understanding the way that I was put together, that made me different, that made me work in a different way than what I saw unfolded in my family dynamics. And it's not that they were wrong and I am right or anything like that. It's just, let us put it this way, it was just like a clash between different types of mindsets, different types of organic vessels, and different types of orientation and perception of reality. So my cats, one at a time, took care of me. They were there with me all the time. Those of you who have cats, you know how nurturing and protective cats can be. I had one that used to walk with me to school. She would wait there in the bush 5 or 6 hours, and then when I came back, because she couldn't breach that territory, but when I came back up the stairs, she would come out of the bush, meow, and then follow me. So my cat would come out of the bush, meow, and welcome me back and follow with me. She was happy to see me, and I sensed her happiness, and that made me happy that she was happy. And then she would follow me back home, and then she would play with me and I would play with her, and we would be around each other. She would be literally around my feet all the time, and when I was sitting down, she would be there if I was on the table or in my bed, and when I was sleeping. So she was there, she was my caretaker in many ways that my family never were really able to, because for me the caretaking is also a matter of energetic exchange. It's not just done by words, it's not just done by intent, it is done by action. And the way that it makes the organic vessel respond electrochemically to different types of close approach. So this clairvoyant ability to be able to sense and feel, these are two different things. Sense is something that is happening with our peripheral nervous system. Feeling is more connected to emotional content that are being processed through the neural network, and by that are added with our thought forms and how we interpret and perceive reality. With that, it was understood for me clearly that there were different levels of this reality, and my cat showed me, including nature and butterflies and flowers and being out there, that this world had secrets that most people did not have access to. So that was another secret I learned to carry with me and survive via that one. As in, yes, this human realm where most people are living would not nurture my deepest needs and my core energies. But in many ways, this hidden interconnectedness with reality itself and with nature and with the life forms that it holds, the ones that have no language, that has no mental capacity like humans have. They have a different type of mental capacity. They have a different way of processing information that is based upon sensing, perception, what we could call clairvoyant abilities. And due to my interconnectedness with my cats, it was kind of activated in me That's how we communicated, not via words. They did understand words. I could give them verbal information, but I learned how to visualize images at the same time and understand their subtle language, what they were sharing with me. And that developed a different sense in me that most people don't have, because most people rely on communication and listening and seeing and doing the human way of communicating, the human way of interacting. And I learned a different way of interacting. I learned that hands could speak, that I could sense energy with my hands. The cats, they taught me how to understand what they were wishing from me, because cats are a little bit demanding, right? You know that if you don't play the alpha, they will. So you have to create a kind of interconnectedness with the animal so that they understand, yes, you're in charge, and we respect your position as you respect my position. So also a level of respect for other life forms, from other levels of communication, other ways of interacting, and other ways of sharing kind emotions and caring potentials within the different realms and within the different scope of the different types of organic vessels. I know it sounds very sciencey, but that's the purpose. What does this do to you if I have this appearance and we're talking from this level of appearance? Would you take me seriously? How would you respond if you went out in nature and out in reality and suddenly the person that come up to you looked like this? Little green woman? How would you respond? Would you be able to see through the overlay? This is the holographic overlay. But it looks as if this is really my appearance. Deception, playfulness, cloaking, secrecy, or just trying to accommodate what we would like to perceive, because this is how the human mind works. We don't look like this, do we? Do we? Perhaps. Perhaps not. Who knows? It's cloaked. However, that super sensitivity and expanded clairvoyant abilities were not particularly well done for me, so to speak. Sorry, I'm trying to find the right word here. It was not working very well for me at school. The super sensitivity played in school. It stressed me out. It made me tired. It made me feel a lot of stuff that I would rather be without. And at some point, I actually chose to close down completely, lose my innocence, and then just went up into my head, where I was just learning to process information like the rest of people do on this planet, which naturally led to a situation in my early 20s where I suddenly discovered that I was so far from who and whatever I was that I needed to find my way back. And that's technically what kickstarted my journey. So from having these abilities as a survival mechanism as a kid, and I know this sounds very psychological, and it is, and it's deliberately made so. And then it not made so. I choose to make it, to put it this way. So to expand your awareness of clairvoyant abilities and understanding that some of us that actually have them, they arose from situations that might not have been particularly nice, that we might have these extraordinary senses due to environment that were dissimilar to what the rest of humanity have. And that also leads us into a lot of psychological processes that we need to deal with, that we need to cope with, understanding who and what we are and why we have these abilities and where they come from, to acknowledge not only that it makes us special, but it also gives us certain disadvantages and certain challenges, which I, as a psychotherapist, challenges. And I discovered that we had these challenges, right? I had them. And when I decided to become a licensed psychotherapist, it was just as much to get tools, to work with both my own psychological structure, to understand more. I'd already studied levels of psychology to begin with, so I was not unfamiliar with the theories behind it. But I chose a different type of angle to psychotherapy, and I chose the one within the concept of Walter Kempler as well as Yalom, that goes with first and foremost group dynamics, family group dynamics, as well as existential psychotherapy, as in why am I here, what am I doing here, and not within the scope of religion. Later on I added that one with my bachelor's degree in theology, not because I'm religious, but because I wanted to know how it works. So it was all about schooling to be ready for this reality, whatever that meant. And at some point I began to understand, well, perhaps I actually have a purpose here. Perhaps there is something that I need to figure out here, since I am so dissimilar. Why am I so dissimilar? And to be completely honest, in the beginning of my journey, as I began to tap into some of my past lives and recall some of my past lives, which I later on have learned to discern between what is my past life and what's interception technology, engineering past life memories that are actually not my own, but put there to produce a specific type of configuration in my energy system, so that I will be connected to specific type of timelines. But when I began this work, I was kind of thinking, is this a punishment? Have I done something really, really horrible to be so dissimilar? Or why is that? What's going on here? And is this fair? Is this legit? So I asked the right questions. Now, I'm not going to say that schooling here is something pretty and make it into something that's romanticizing it. Those of you who follow me for years, you know that I am I'm a born and bred cynic, right? Not that I was that as a kid. I still have my innocence, but the appropriate innocence at the appropriate moment, at the appropriate circumstance, as when I work with nature spirits, or I work with the insectoids, or I work with souls that need to be released, or I work with the other realms where kindness and what we call grace is necessary to meet with these creatures, to emit a specific type of energy, which was mainly what the cats taught me, because cats are also, as you know and are familiar with from Egyptian mythology, they are the guides into the underworld. They are in between this world and the underworld. Which leads me into remembering when I did college, I did a thesis, a paper on the Egyptian pharaohs and their mythology and their underworld. So I was already onto this understanding, okay, there are different types of underworld, which I learned even more so when I began studying some of the myths behind the text material in the Old Testament, which in Israel is called the Hebrew, the Torah, or the Hebrew Bible, if you like. Anyways, that's not where I wanted to go. Where I want to go here is this understanding of, okay, there are different modalities of how we approach the different realms. And since I have been exercised in all of these different levels from childhood and closing it all down and learning to open it all back up in meditation and contemplation and energy work, because the cats allowed me to have that astral access. When I talk about healing that way, that's a whole other angle. So anyways, purposes in this introductory video that we'll put together eventually is that I want to tap into all these different levels. I want to investigate the different levels on their own premises, on their own foundation, so to speak, thinking there, how to put this together and say, okay, we have different levels. We have the science level, we have the psychological level, we have the clairvoyant level, we have the different distortion fields, which are now called the astral plane, are called distortion fields. We have the different schools that have interpreted this in specific ways. We have a lot of ancient material that also from people that have experienced this. So I would say there has been, throughout the human culture, at least the last 6,000 years, there have always been people that have had access. Normally they were medicine men or women, shamans, let's not romanticize, people that were able to access the other realms, either using the world tree to go up or to go down, or to be in the middle ground as in the human realms. Or in Buddhist cosmology, we have 31 realms in Buddhist cosmology, and the human realm is the 5th. We have many different versions of these systems, and I've looked into quite a lot of them, mostly into the older ones that began both the mythology, the historical part of it, what we find in world religions, studied that as well, and going into esoteric material, working with healing abilities. I'm also a licensed healer, so I've had clients, I work with it in practicality, and all these different experiences began to form for me a type of, okay, we can work with this, we need to work with this. Instead of the old ways, we need to figure out new ways to work with this level of information of who and what we are. Point being, with the work I am doing and my pioneering work in the whole academy and the way I put my class material together and what I've done in now 40 plus classes, explaining the progression work, explaining how to progress using the higher order capacities. Not just clairvoyant abilities that reaches into the astral plane and the emotional field, into the vibrational field, into the artificial fourth and onward, or the telepathic capacities, the ability to visually connect with reality and imprint and impose and project our mental concepts onto reality, which in the holographic energetic realms actually comes to life and creates light codes that begins to form, that begins to accrete, that begins to create worlds. And all of these very, very vast levels of expanded awareness capacities that we used to have, not as much inside this physical form, but beyond and before this physical form. Of course, it's not just about getting all of the abilities and powers, because there are principles around this. There are different rules of engagement. There are different laws that governs how we utilize energy. And if we utilize energy in wrongful ways, well, we create distortion, and distortion equals karma. That's the same. So, and that determines how we are being processed in this realm and other realms and this world and other worlds. So it all comes down to the sciences of evolution and the sciences of awareness and the sciences of progression and the sciences of the other worlds and the realms that we can participate in. It's not religion, it's not spirituality, it's science, but it's a different type of science and it demands a different type of mindset. And that's what this little introductory video is all about. That is introducing, okay, let's begin this different type of project, this different type of science. And then there is, of course, the pull-ins, the extraterrestrial projects, the 15,000-year-old colonization programs, what we have become, what we are now, and how we work with this physical form to get it back into being able to reconnect to the original reality fields. Perhaps not as much in our physical vessel that's connected to this type of reality field, but what we have inside, the inner human, the higher order awareness. And I'm deliberately not calling it the higher self because my perception of that is also different. And it's tied to a different type of system of thought that I don't really align myself with. I don't really resonate with the old Hindu teaching systems. As well as I do have a lot of affiliation and connectedness to the Theravada Buddhism, but that's because I actually have a past life as a Buddhist monk in Tibet. So that's where that one comes from. And all of this is part of who and what I've become now. Because as I see it, the progression work is not about the powers. It's not just about our abilities. It is to remember who and what we are, who we used to be, and realign ourselves with all the lives we have had, and be strong enough to acknowledge these, remember these, feel these, sense these, and remember them, recalling them as clearly as we remember from this life. And those of us who've done the psychological work, working with our childhood trauma and all of the things that we experienced that we didn't know how to deal with, and by that created different types of defense mechanisms and different types of comfort zones and different coping mechanisms to deal with our differences from the rest of our family or from wherever we were. We are now on the next step of that journey, and that is to begin the psychological processes. It is to dive deep into the core of who and what we are, and dive into the pain of remembering and the pain of what we lost, and moaning sometimes, and mourning the losses, and get over the shame, get over the choices we made, and realize that the psychological journey of remembering who and what we are just in this life and piece ourselves together, which is called the integration process, can be expanded into the past life, where we do the same integration process, deal with what has spilled over into this life, that is the foundation of our emotional patterns, the deep core subconscious levels of why we are as we are, why we're born with different types of modalities and different types of mindsets. A newborn has its own memory base already, knowingly or unknowingly, sometimes recalling it, sometimes not. But the matter of the fact is all of these hidden lives. So the progression work is just as much as dealing with past lives and what we have experienced there and what needs to be unraveled, and the comfort zone that we had in that life, the defense mechanisms we had in these past lives, and some of the different modalities of mind and awareness that we had in other lifetimes beyond this system and above this system. There are many different things to recall and remember. So for me, the progression work, as I said, not just the powers, they are a side effect. It is the path of remembering, and it is the path of understanding what awareness actually is and how we integrate the higher levels of awareness into this body, but also how we learn to be aware in everyday life, how we learn to cope with life as it is, this reality as it is, not just this beauty and not just all of the senses that we have, sensing into the realms of energy, sensing into all of the wonderful worlds that are built upon a different type of energy, but also sensing into all of the very, very disheartening worlds of pain and suffering that are also part of this reality. And realms where there's only technology, and realms where there are only subtle forms that have lost ability to sense and perceive and be in organic vessels, for good and for ill. The polarity systems, the opposition dynamics, all of the different steps and hoops and loops of this reality and whatever that means. Similarly, as we as kids learn to navigate in this world and become grown-ups, some having succeeded better than others, unfolding certain levels of their brain structure, some only getting to the limbic system, barely touching the frontal lobe systems, and onward and so forth. So we are all different and we work differently. And acknowledging these differences is important. Also acknowledging that some of us are more expanded than others, and that is also okay. Some are more closed up, some are living happily and joyfully and very contently within the world as it is, and they are also in their own process of whatever that is. It's not up to us to change that. It's not up to us to choose what is right and wrong for anyone else, because we choose. We have our own choices to do in this life and previous lifetimes, and what we're dealing with in the path of remembering is the choices we made, and what type of energy they generated, what type of energy configuration that gave us, and how that aligned with our original purpose and function as evolving and progressing consciousness structures that chose to take form in different realms and in different domains, and we're using different types of organic vessels. It's a lifelong journey. And that lifelong journey also takes part of this life. And when I say lifelong, we could say it's within the cycles of progression and evolution within different realms with different consciousness potentials and different organic vessels and non-organic vessels. And this journey continues into this reality. with this, we also understand that the progression journey is not just about recalling who and what we are. It's not just about mastering our abilities and the knowledge we have from this and previous lifetimes and integrating it into this form so that it can expand and develop new energetic sensation potentialities and possibilities and new modalities and faculties of mind. It is just as much also to learn to master energy and learn to master what energy is and how to work appropriately with energy and learn to master energy inside this reality and the challenges it gives inside this reality as well as beyond. So the journey is in front of us and challenges are in front of us, and this is part of what I want to share in some of this free material I'm now going to produce and upload onto the Whole Academy YouTube channel. And I hope you will meet me there and take it for what it is and learn. Thank you.